So I think we will start to introduce the great master Peter Neligan by Johnny. So Johnny can start.
I don't think Dr. Neligan needs any introduction, but yeah, Dr. Neligan, I'm Johnny. I'm on the NERV team working with Tommy. I think today's purpose is meant to be is definitely meant to be informal and definitely just to get your perspectives on some of the things that we're
It's 6 o'clock in the evening here, so I brought some wine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
we can open some wine now. I think we can open some wine. It'll definitely make it much more less formal. Yeah. But yeah, I think well we have like four. Just kind of briefly introduce actually our residency program. We go to 6 years, but technically we're starting to apply the residents that apply start from the first year. So they officially enter our program around the third year, but every year there's about 4 residents. So as in a lot of the US programs, there's four residents too, like per year. So definitely it'd be a bit hard to introduce you to all of them. But if any of our residents have any questions, just kind of briefly introduce yourself and then just ask anything you want. I think one of the residents wanted to ask you about music.
I have a question.
He actually
Sure.
visited you and met you a
anything.
few years ago. Yeah. So
Yes.
I think I'll start off with the first questions but it is a bit more of a formal question. When you were starting off in your residency, was plastic surgery already kind of more of aesthetic, cosmetically? 它的眼线好像有点问题。Can you still hear us?是
通常10-20秒后会回来了。
Okay. We'll wait till he comes back. 我就先问第一个问题了，还是不是我的连线吗？
没有，是
没有，应该是他的连线问题。
我们的都是好的。
通常会
他的连线呢？
我们这边都好。对。
好吧，那我
Everything went quiet there for a minute.
Yeah, welcome back.
Welcome back. The connection was a little off. Yeah. Can you still hear us, Dr. Neligan?
I can hear you. The screen is frozen, but I can hear you. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Good.
I'll just ask the first question. When you started off in your residency, was plastic surgery already focused on a lot of cosmetic? Do most residents, after they finish, become cosmetic surgeons, or was it more of a already starting off to be a more academic-based reconstruction where, yeah, well, what was it like for you when you first started residency?
I did my training in Ireland. I grew up in Ireland. Plastic surgery in Ireland was not very well established. There was a formal training program, but it wasn't anything like the training programs now. You basically had to create your own program and go from one rotation to another, and you had to apply for each job every 6 months. You had to apply for a new job every year, and most of the surgery, it was all reconstructive. There was virtually no cosmetic surgery, but it was much broader than it is now, because I was trained in, for example, hypospadias. Plastic surgeons did all the hypospadias. We did all of the head and neck resections as well as the reconstructions, and reconstruction was very basic at that time. We weren't doing any microsurgery. I actually taught myself microsurgery when I was a resident, because the resident who was immediately senior to me, he went to do a formal micro-fellowship in Melbourne, in Australia, with Bernard O'Brien. And the hospital had already bought a microscope and all the microsurgical instruments before he left. And so when he left, I went to in Dublin, in Ireland, there are 2 maternity hospitals. I would go to the maternity hospital every Tuesday and get a placenta and bring it back and practice under the microscope and learn how to do anastomosis and stuff. And I had nobody to teach me, but I was just basically doing microsurgery in the same way I was doing regular surgery, except under a microscope. And I think my micro technique is still like that. I view microsurgery as just another way of doing surgery. It's nothing special. And then when I finished my training, I went to Canada to do fellowship training, and I ended up doing 4 fellowships. And those were more formal. And I did a fellowship in pediatric surgery, craniofacial surgery, micro, and burns. Before I started in practice.
Was it common at that time to stay in, like if you're a plastic surgery resident in Canada, for example, was it common to stay in the program and continue pursuit academically, or just stay in the hospital, or is it common to leave?
Canada at that time. So I went to Canada in 1983, and at that time, it was a mixture. Some people stayed in academic surgery, some people went into cosmetic surgery. Cosmetic surgery in Canada was like the US. It was much more developed, and a lot of people had, their own practices, and there were no spas like people have now, and very few. There were some surgery centers, but they weren't called surgery centers. Then they were just, the guys did surgery in their office, but it wasn't formally, and it wasn't accredited the way it is now. But yeah, in North America at that time, it was much more formal. The training in Canada at that time, when I went there as a fellow, the training for plastic surgery was 4 years of training, and then it became 5 years. In the US, it's 6 years, in Seattle, the residents generally, again, it's about 50-50. Some go into private practice and some go into academic practice. And private practice has changed, because at one time, when I was training and people finished their practice, finished their training, they would go into private practice and they would hang out in as many emergency rooms as they could to get themselves known, to get some cases. And then as they got established, they would drop some of the stuff they didn't like doing, and a lot of them just ended up doing cosmetic surgery. Whereas now, a lot of residents who are finishing, they don't do that. They don't go into solo practice. A lot of them will go into a hospital practice that may be a private hospital practice as opposed to a university practice, or they may join a group practice. But the days when somebody went out and just put a sign up and started operating by themselves, that doesn't happen much anymore.
I see. When you were in, a lot's been said about the Toronto being, at that time, especially when you were there, it was kind of like this, if I'm not mistaken, it was pretty much the center of the world with regards to reconstruction, because I guess there was a reason why Prof. Wei, our craniofacial, Yu Rui Chang, and many of them went there, and I know my teacher, Susan McKinnon, was also in Toronto, right? And Dr. Hertzes and Dr. Joe Bruss.
When I arrived in Toronto, Susan McKinnon was a brand new attending. She had just been appointed. Yeah.
So
and you're right. I mean, it was a real powerhouse. Joe Bruss was there, Susan McKinnon, Ralph Mangtilo, who Professor Wei and I did the same fellowship with Dr. Mangtilo. Professor Wei was a couple of years ahead of me. But there was, Professor Wei, Ron Zucker, Nancy McKee, who was a real pioneer in her day. And there was a big burn unit. There was, the craniofacial program with Joe Gruss, peripheral nerve with Susan McKinnon. She was just starting at that time. But it was a very exciting time because all of this stuff was new, When I went to Toronto, Joe Gruss was doing a lot of facial trauma in Sunnybrook Hospital. And he would spend hours, with a maxillary fracture, and he would wire all the pieces together and put bone grafts in, and that was unheard of. Nobody ever did that. There were no plates at the time, and nobody would ever put a bone graft into a facial fracture at that time. It was just taboo. And he developed that whole program, and the way we treat facial trauma now is in large part due to the work he did, and also the work of Paul Manson in Baltimore and Johns Hopkins, and they actually were the only two doing that work at that time, and they became very close friends. But the rest of the community kind of shunned them because they were thought to be, doing too much surgery and overreacting to some of these fractures, which we take for granted now.
I see. It's always very interesting for us to hear about the history of back then. We've heard it from Prof. Wei. I've heard it from Dr. McKinnon. And I think it's important to have that kind of resources and the mentorship at that place, which can further convince people to stay and to do academics. So yeah, that's one of the, I think we'll ask more about this, but Laura, if it's okay, you can continue for the next question, or if anyone could just raise their hand. Yeah.
Okay, hello. So I'm the 6th-year resident, Jia Fangchen, can call me Laura. And
Okay.
so I will moderate the talk today, but I think the Johnny and Tommy already know you very well, but we have lots of newcomers like the new residents that haven't known your history well. So I'm going to like to briefly introduce yourself, okay?
Okay.
So okay, so our master Peter Neligan grew up probably finished the college at the Dublin, right?
That's
Trinity
correct.
College very long ago, and he also finished his plastic surgery training at Dublin at the Royal College of the Surgeons in Ireland in the 1980s, very long ago. And then he moved to Toronto for the fellowship training at the University of Toronto, complete the fellowship in the surgical research, the pediatric plastic surgery, the microvascular surgery, and the burn surgery, like you have mentioned previously. And then you start to practice in the Sudbury, Ontario in 1987 before returning back to the Toronto University in 1991 to take the position at the Wellesley Hospital at the burn unit. And then at the 1993, Dr. Peter Neligan moved to Toronto General Hospital, where he specialized in the oncological reconstruction and the reconstructive surgery, microsurgery, which was very famous. And he served also as the chief of the plastic surgery at the Toronto General Hospital from the 1996 until he moved to Seattle at the 2007. At this period, he got the chair of the University Division of Plastic Surgery. In 1999, he also appointed as the Warden Chair in the Reconstructive Plastic Surgery, which was the first endowed chair in the plastic surgery in Canada. And then after winning a lot of awards in Canada, he then decided to move to Seattle. So he currently he served as the board of director for the American Society of Plastic Surgeons and is the member of the board of director of American Head and Neck Society. He also the chairman of the advisor lots of plastic and maxillofacial surgery councils. Now, as I know, Dr. Peter Neligan already retired last year, and then now he moved between the Phoenix and also Toronto to do his jobs, and he also until now already authored 7 books, including the well-known Neligan textbook, that everybody need to read and familiar with before our plastic surgery board. And he also over 70 book chapters and over 170 peer-reviewed papers. So this is the brief introduction of the Dr. Peter Neligan. Everything I missed or you want to add?
Well,
So,
let
Peter?
me, no, nothing, I have nothing to add, but let me explain why I practice in this place called Sudbury. So when I went to Toronto, my plan was to go back to Dublin and practice there for the rest of my days. But we really enjoyed living in Toronto. It's a lovely city, and we put a sheet of paper and stuck it to our fridge. We have 2 kids, and everybody in the family could write on the sheet of paper. And on one side we had Dublin, on the other side we had one side we had Ireland, one side we had Canada. And the only thing on the Ireland side was Granny and Pops, who Granny and Pops were my wife's parents. My parents were already dead. And on the Canadian side, there was skiing and there was tobogganing and there was all sorts of things. So we decided to stay in Canada. And I got offered a job at the University of Toronto, but the Ministry of Health in Ontario, the Ministry of Health said, no, you can't take that job because you're not a Canadian citizen, you're not a landed immigrant, which is a permanent resident. And so they said, either you go back or you work in an underserviced area. So I worked in the underserviced area, which was this place called Sudbury, which is, it's about 400 kilometers north of Toronto. And I didn't want to go there, but it was fantastic because it was far enough away from Toronto that people didn't want you to send them to Toronto. If a lot of people who live near Toronto, when they go to a local hospital, they'd prefer to be sent downtown to University Hospital for their treatment. But in Sudbury, they didn't want to be sent because it was so far away. And so we got to do all sorts of things. And so I was doing microsurgery, I was doing a lot of hand surgery, I was doing I was doing everything. And it was a lot of fun. But then during that time, I became a permanent resident. And that was the arrangement I had with the Ministry of Health, that if I worked in this place for 3 years, that I would get my permanent resident status. And then at that time, Dr. Mangtelo, who was then chief in Toronto, he called me and wanted me to come back to Toronto. And so I did decide to go back to Toronto and stay there. So altogether, we lived in Canada for about 25 years. My kids are still in Canada.
Okay. Well, so before you go to Toronto and take the job, why go back about why you want to like apply the fellowship abroad to the Toronto, because you already finished your.
Yeah, the training system in Ireland is very, very much like the training system in the UK. The system there now is much different, but at the time I trained, you did your training and basically you waited for a job, and you had to wait until either somebody retired or somebody died before you got a job. And so the average age of appointment when I was a resident, the average age of a new attending appointment in plastic surgery in Ireland was 44. And so what most people did was that they finished their training and then they would go abroad to get fellowship experience and then come back. And I decided to go to Canada. I told you that the guy who was immediately senior to me had gone to do a fellowship in Melbourne, Australia. And I knew that he and I were going to be working together for the rest of our days. And so I thought it would be better for me to get experience in North America. And so I applied to 10 different places in North America for a fellowship, and only two places answered. One was Toronto and one was Louisville, Kentucky. And the Toronto job, the timing and everything about the job was more convenient and better, so we decided to go to Toronto. I didn't know what Louisville, Kentucky was like. I mean, it could just as easily have gone there, but we ended up going to Toronto. And then as I said, at that time, we still intended going back, but there was no job to go back to. And so I basically just did fellowships until we decided what to do. And then the whole Sudbury thing happened.
Well, so do you think the fellowship training is very important turning point in your career or in your
I
life?
do, and I always advise residents to do a fellowship, because when you go through your training, and if you're training somewhere like Shangang, you're going to have excellent training, because the level of practice there is fantastic. So you're going to be very well trained in all aspects of plastic surgery. But what a fellowship does for you is it allows you to concentrate on one area, which should be an area that is the area that you really, really love. And then during that year of fellowship, you can cherry pick, which means you can just choose the bits that you like. And if you're working with a couple of different people, you can say, oh, I like the way he does that, but I don't like the way he does it. So in my practice, I'm going to do it his way, but he does it a better way for the other thing. So you get a chance to see different things and to think about what you're going to do when you're in practice. And I always advise our residents that they should not do a fellowship in their own place, because you've already seen everything there is to see in your own place. And so you should go someplace different to see your fellowship. And some of the fellowship, a lot of the fellowship is learning new things and getting practice at doing things, but a lot of it is also learning things you don't want to do and things that maybe you think are not, you could do better, or that's better done where you train.
Okay, thank you. And since there's now like some clinical fellowships, you practice with the doctors and take care of the patients, do the surgeries, and otherwise you can do some like research fellowships after we graduate and finish the like the clinical training. So which would you suggest or prefer as the chief resident, or after the graduation we can take? What kind of fellowship you think is better?
I think it depends what you want to do in your career. I mean, some people are very interested in research and want to continue to do research in their practice. And for somebody like that, doing a research fellowship is very useful, because you learn the techniques of research. You learn how to critically appraise the literature. You learn how to design experiments. You learn how to write grants, and all that's very important. Probably the majority of people, a clinical fellowship is more applicable, because you're learning stuff that you're actually going to be doing from day to day. So a lot depends on what you want to do. If you're interested in research and you want research to be a big part of what you do in your practice, then a research fellowship is great. And the other thing I always tell people is don't be hung up on how many years you're spending. As I told you, I did 4 fellowships. And people, they go through their training and say, no, I've got to start practice. I can't afford to do this. You got the rest of your life to make enough of an income that it doesn't matter. And so if you want to do a clinical fellowship and a research fellowship, that's fine. Got lots of time. You guys are all young.
Anyone wants to ask questions about also the go abroad to see the doctors and visit these masters and go the fellowships? 嘉豪有没有什么要问的？一样也是 R6。嘉豪。
Hi, Dr. Neligan. It's such a pleasure to meet you in person. I'm the 6th-year resident in Kaohsiung branch of Chang'e Memorial Hospital. Currently, now working hard on your textbook, preparing for the board. Yeah, actually, I also do have some questions in terms of fellowship, but for me, it's I'm kind of wondering what is the best timing to go out to apply for a fellowship. Is it when I just start my attending? Is it the time when I just started, or is it probably a couple of years afterwards, or is it maybe after 5 or 7 years after I start my attending? I wonder what does Professor Neligan think
So
about the
my
timing?
feeling is, yeah, my feeling is that I mean, you can do a fellowship anytime. Some people do a fellowship during their residency. I'm not sure that's a great idea because the more experience you have, or the more training you have before you start your fellowship, the better. A lot of people either don't want to or can't afford to take time off after they've started their attending job. You know, if you've been building a practice, it's very disruptive if you suddenly disappear for a year and then come back. You can have to start from scratch. So my feeling is your best time to do it is at the end of your training, between the time you finish your training and the time you start your attending job, because then you've got as much. You're fully trained, and I think you get more out of your fellowship at that time than you do earlier, certainly, and maybe later, because if you've been in practice for a few years, you may be a bit resistant to sort of learning new things, because you know you've established the ways you do things, and you maybe don't want to change those. Whereas when you finish your training and you're fully trained but not yet started, then I think that's the perfect time to do it.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Professor Neligan. And another question about fellowship is the duration. For example, because we know that in the United States there are a lot of masters in every field. For example, in breast reconstruction, there are so many centers that you can go to, and for us, we only have probably a year or two for our maybe our fellowship. So how long in a center do you think that would be beneficial, or to really can see what's in there? Is it like probably 3 months or 6 months in a center? So if I have let's just say that if I have a year of fellowship, should I probably just go to one center, or should I probably split it in half and probably have 6 months in a place and another 6 months in another city, another center? What do you think?
I think a lot depends on what you want to do and how much training you've had in that area. You know, let's say you want to do a lot of breast surgery in your practice and you want a breast fellowship, then how much time you spend depends on how much time you've spent on breast surgery during your training. If you don't have a lot, or for example, micro is probably a better example. You know, some residents haven't had a lot of exposure to micro during their residency, and so they're basically starting from scratch when they're starting their micro fellowship. And I think that the less training you have, the more time you need to spend on your fellowship. I think the minimum amount of time you should spend, regardless, is probably about 6 months. A lot of fellowships are structured, certainly here in the US, a lot of fellowships are structured as a one-year fellowship. So it's very difficult. It can be very difficult to get a shorter fellowship. And if the other difficulty for people like you guys from Taiwan is getting, and not just Taiwan, but any place outside of the US, is getting privileges for a clinical fellowship. You can go as an observer anytime, and I think if you're going as an observer to some place, then I think 6 months is too long. I think 3 months is probably enough time. And if you have, let's say you have a year and you don't have you know, all the US exams that would allow you to get you know, clinical fellowship, then you could certainly spend 3 months and do, you know, 3 or 4 months and do 2 or 3 different places as an observer. And again, if you go too early in your training, you're not going to get anything out of an observership. But if you've already trained and you know what to do, then I think you know, 3 months is good. And that's the one situation where I think if you're going as an observer, if you're doing an observership, you may get more out of an observership if you've already started your attending job, as opposed to a clinical fellowship where you're hands-on and doing stuff. I think the clinical fellowship, you're better off doing it at the end of your training before you start your attending. But an observership may be better to be done a year or two after you've started your practice, because then you know what the problems are, you know what your own problems are in practice, and you probably get more out of it that way.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I have no further questions. Thanks, Laura.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor Neligan. And as you are practicing in Toronto General Hospital and Seattle, I've read your published papers, lots of studies, like 500 and plus. So the areas you covered based on the craniofacial and also some microsurgery and lymphedema now, and previously in the past 10 years, you also wrote a lot of paper about the head and neck reconstruction. So do you think we in the future, like new plastic surgeons need to focus on very small area, or better to practice more broad general fields?
I don't really know what the best answer to that question is. In my own practice, the way I started was I never planned anything about my career. None of it was planned. And when I started, as you mentioned, I started after I returned to Toronto from the peripheral job where I was doing everything. When I returned to Toronto, I started doing burns because I had a fellowship in burns, and I was director of the burn center in Toronto for a couple of years. But I think my passion was microsurgery. I loved microsurgery, and so when I had the opportunity to move to Toronto General to do mainly microsurgery, that was wonderful. And at that time, it just so happened that the busiest service requiring microsurgery was head and neck surgery, and so I did probably about 70% of my practice was head and neck when I was in Toronto, and the rest of it was sarcoma and other oncologic reconstructions. I did cosmetic surgery initially in the first 5 years of my practice, particularly when I was in Sudbury. Cosmetic surgery was probably about 30% of my practice. And I continued to do cosmetic surgery when I went back to Toronto initially. But then when I moved to doing a lot of microsurgery, I found that running a cosmetic practice was very difficult because, I'd have a facelift booked and there would be an urgent head and neck case that required microsurgery that I have to do. So I have to cancel my facelift. And so I decided to just stop doing cosmetic surgery. I found the surgery was fun, but I found that the patients were a pain in the neck. And so I decided to just stick with reconstructive surgery. And then when I moved to Seattle, like at that time, my practice was 70% head and neck. And when I moved to Seattle, I spoke to the head and neck surgeons, and I said that I wanted to continue to do head and neck reconstruction, and they were fine with that. They said, "Yeah, no problem." And I got an adjunct appointment to the Department of Otolaryngology, but they actually never sent me any patients for reconstruction, and the reason was financial, because the system is a silo system. So the head and neck department, otolaryngology, is a separate department. So if they got me to do their reconstructions, that was lost revenue for their department. They could do it themselves and keep the revenue for their department. And that's when I started my. I was also doing a lot of breast reconstruction at that time, but then I noticed that I saw so many breast patients with lymphedema, and I spoke to our breast surgeons and said, what is your lymphedema rate? How many patients get lymphedema? And they said, "Oh, we don't see that very often." And I said, "That's bullshit. There's a lot of patients with lymphedema." And so I started doing lymphedema. And then lymphedema became 80% of my practice by the time I retired. And let me just talk a little bit about retiring and why I retired. So I always said that I would continue working as long as it was fun. And when COVID came, it was no longer much fun, because you'd go to work, I went to work in scrubs every day. I did my cases, wore a mask all day long, came home, took my scrubs off, got in the shower, and did exactly the same thing the next day. There was no such thing as traveling, going to meetings. There was no such thing as meeting your friends for a coffee and my wife said, okay, I'm quitting. She's an oncologist. She said, you can do what you like, but I'm done. So I said, okay, I'm going to quit too. And so what I've been doing since I retired is we're redoing the next edition of the textbook, the 6-volume textbook. It's going to be published in 2023. We're redoing the perforator flat book that I did, which is going to be published in 2024 probably. I just did rewrote Ian Jackson, who was a very famous plastic surgeon, wrote a wonderful book called Local Flaps in Head and Neck Reconstruction, which was one of the all-time bestsellers in plastic surgery. He died in 2020, and I just revised with 2 other surgeons. We revised that textbook, which is going to be published this year, and it's just on local flaps and head and neck reconstruction. And then we're going to do one more edition of the lymphedema book, which will probably be ready by 2024. So that'll keep me busy, and then after that, I'll just drink wine.
Okay, so what's the motivation for you to start to write the books? Also, the very famous Neligan 6 series books for you at the beginning.
So the way that happened, I had never thought of doing that book, but I after I went to Seattle, I got an email from Elsevier, the publishers. And the email said, you know, we're looking at doing the next edition of the textbook. The previous edition was done by Steve Mathis, and he had died. And said, we want to do this textbook, and we'd like your opinion as to who you think would be a good editor for this book. And so I sent them back a list of names that I thought would be good editors. And then I got another email maybe a month or 6 weeks later saying, we have a short list of people that we think would be good editors for the book, and you're on the short list. Can we come to Seattle and talk to you about it? And so the publisher came from London to Seattle to talk about the book. And she asked me, you know, what if you were to do this book, what would you want to do? And so I talked to her about having volume editors, because the previous editions had not had volume editors, and plastic surgery is too big for one person to know everything. You can't know everything. And so I thought having editors specific to the volumes would be good. And I talked about cutting out, there was a lot of duplication in the previous editions, and I wanted to cut out the duplication, and I wanted to have everything in color. And so that's what I told her. And then about another month or 2 later, I got another email saying, we'd like you to be the editor of the book. Can we send you a contract? And so they sent me a contract, and that's how it started. And then Elsevier, it's the biggest textbook, it's the biggest medical textbook that's published in all specialties. And it's the flagship publication for Elsevier. It's their biggest cash cow. And so they wanted to redo it every 5 years, which I thought was too soon. And so we did the first edition 2012, then we did 2017, and managed to get an extra year for the next one, which is 2023. And then that'll be my last one. I won't do another one after this.
Another one in the 2028.
Yeah, not me. Somebody else can do it.
Do you plan to do such a huge series at the beginning? The books are so big. It contains every field, also including the cosmetic for a huge book inside that.
Yeah, well, the way we did it was once I agreed to do the book, then the publisher, who's a very experienced woman, she came back to Seattle, and we spent several days in my house going through the previous edition and deciding what we needed to keep, what we needed to change, not necessarily authors, but subjects. And we decided that when we looked at all of the, and I had to read all 8 volumes of the Mathis book in order to figure out what was what. And so we decided what stuff could be cut out. And that's how we ended up with the 6 volumes. That was one of the reasons, because there was a lot of superfluous stuff in the other books. And the other reason was that the publisher, they wanted, because we were putting everything in color, their expenses were going up, and so they wanted to keep it to as few volumes as possible. And they spent their budget for the third edition, the one that was published in 2012, their budget for artwork was $2 million. And so we had carte blanche to make new drawings of everything, and we had 22 artists working on it. So when I started, I didn't realize it was going to be such a huge project when I started, but it's been a lot of fun. And apart from writing and editing chapters, like what we're doing right now is we have a website where the authors submit their chapters, and then the volume editors edit it, either accept it or send it back to the author for changes. And then once they're happy with it, they send it to me, and I go through each chapter and look at their edits, look at everything, look at all the images, and make sure that I'm happy with them. And then once I'm happy with them, I send them to the editor in Elsevier, and they start the process of production. But it doesn't finish there, because then when the first time I did it, I thought, okay, we're done. That's it. Don't have to do anything more. And then you get the galley proofs, and galley proofs are the typesetters have questions about everything, and you have to answer those questions. And we thought about this, and we thought, well, we could send them back to the authors to do all the corrections. But then we thought, if we do that, because there are like 250 contributors, and if we just send all of these things back, it's going to take too much time. And so we decided that I would do the galley proofs and the volume editors. And so I did all of that, and then I thought, okay, I'm finished. And then they've sent me what are called scatter proofs, and scatter proofs are they are print quality proofs of all of the pictures in the book. And I had to go through each picture and decide if the color was right, if the cropping was right, if the position in the chapter was right, for all 6 volumes. And so we did all of that, and then you do all of that, and then they say, okay, now we need a preface, we need acknowledgements from you, and we need a forward. And so you have to get all of that organized. And then I went into the Elsevier offices, and they say, okay, we need you to help decide on what type of paper we're going to print it on. So you have to decide on the sort of paper they want to print it on. And then the cover design. And so, for example, this last edition, the one that's going to be published in 2023, one of my friends, who's a plastic surgeon in Toronto, who happens to also be an artist, is designing the cover for the new edition. So that'll be kind of special.
I have saw one picture from the website that is that the last series of the coverage, is it in green color?
The last one,
is it in the green
the last
color?
one is just black.
Black. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
another book. And one small question regarding to the textbook. So I saw that the authors for the all chapters will be the expert of that field. But if like the head and neck reconstruction or the breast reconstruction, lots of world-class experts in that field, how do you choose to pick who is going to write the chapter? Who is better? How do you pick up?
We have a meeting at the beginning. Once we have, so the first part is to decide on the table of contents. In other words, the you know, all of the chapters that are going to be written. Once we have, and that is done usually by email with me and the volume editors, and we decide which chapters. And so, for example, when we were doing this current one, there's lots of new things that are happening. So we expanded, for example, the lymphedema chapters in the next one, and we put lots of new chapters in that weren't in the old editions. Once we've done that, then we have a meeting between me, the volume editors, and the Elsevier editors, the publisher editors. And that's usually a face-to-face meeting, and we usually have it somewhere, like the last one we had was in Chicago. The one before that was in San Francisco, and we sit down for a whole weekend around the table, and we have the table of contents, and we go through it, and we decide, okay, so-and-so didn't write a good chapter the last time, but there's this guy Tommy in Changgung, and he'll write a great chapter, so let's ask Tommy. And so that's how we do it. And then once we've decided on who the authors are, then Elsevier sends out a package with you know, the timeline, the instructions for authors, and all sort of stuff. Well, first before we do that, we email, I or the volume editors, whoever knows the person best, emails the person and said, we'd like you to do a chapter for the next, will you do it? And if they say yes, then they get a welcome package. If they say no, I don't have time, then we get somebody else.
Okay, and it sounds like the writing, you start writing book since the 2012, and lots of work like meetings and review, and gone through the pictures and also the paragraphs again and again, and you also lots of clinical practice. How would you manage your time doing like a lot of surgeries and also doing the textbooks and doing so much meetings and go to the lectures and have the international meetings, and what do you have any spare time?
Not a lot, but so the most of the books and papers and stuff are done nights and weekends, but also you know, if you're going to an international meeting and you're on a plane for 7 or 8 hours, you can get a lot of stuff done during that time. And so, yeah, but it's not always straightforward when you do a book. Another book I've done is a book on perforator flaps, and we did it with Phil Blondeel, Jeff Hallock, and Steve Morris, and that was done. The first one was published actually 2006, and the way that happened was that Steve Morris and I had this idea of doing a perforator book, and we went to see the publisher. The publisher at that time was QNP Publications. We went to see Karen, who's the woman who owned that company, and gave her this proposal for a book. And she said, well, I've just talked to Phil Blondeel and Jeff Hallock because they had a similar idea. Why don't you talk to them and see if you guys could just join up? And so we did. And at first it was difficult because they didn't want to join with us, and we didn't want to join with them. But in fact, as it turned out, it ended up a much better book than if you know, if we'd had 2 separate books by 2 people. Doing one book with 4 people was much better. But then, you know, there are fights. Like in that book, there was a big fight as to the order of the authors on the cover. You know, one guy said, no, I want to be first, and the other guy said, no, I want to be first. You know, that argument took a 2-hour phone call before we sorted it out.
Okay, so before we before we proceed to another question for the like your spare time activities, do any attendees or residents want to ask more questions about our Professor about the fellowship, the residency training, the future planning programs, or any regarding to the textbooks? Dr. Zhou?
Hello, Professor Neligan. My name is John. Sorry, I'm a 6-year resident, and as you can see, I'm in the OR right now. But thank you so much for giving us the talk. I'd like to thank Laura and Spencer first for asking regarding the clinical fellowship questions, because I think as chief residents, that's our next step, and that's our primary concern right now is passing the board exam while reading your textbook, but also what our future holds in terms of where we should go, what time we should go out, and stuff like that. So I'd like to thank you on that point. But I think my question right now is just, who are you cheering for this weekend's AFC and NFC championships?
Bengals.
I think it's
Chiefs fan or Rams?
Yeah.
The Rams and Chiefs.
Yeah.
What?
Super Bowl.
Rams.
Johnny's not going to be happy with that side. We'll see. So, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay.
Hello, Dr. Neligan. I'm the 3rd-year resident, Lin Dajun, and I want to express my gratitude. Textbook is like a map for me, like just getting into the field to know the direction.
Good.
Of the surgery, yeah. And also, I want to ask that the plastic surgery is a broad field that involves all parts of the surgery, and the training program is one of the longest of all residency. And but I think nowadays most practicing plastic surgeons become more specialized. And what do you think of the advantage of having a general understanding of plastic surgery during residency before we focused on the field?
I think as a resident, you know, certainly when you start your residency, the majority of people have no idea what they want to do. And as, excuse me, as they go through their residency, they find something that really attracts them, something that, excuse me, something that they could see themselves doing. Yeah. Something that really excites them. And that's a good place to start. Because when you start, the whole thing is exciting. And then as you go through, you find that there's some things that you don't like as much and other things that you find very exciting. But it's very important to keep an open mind as you're a resident, because as you go through the different rotations, you may find something that really cranks your handle, that really, really excites you. I happened to start my practice doing a bit of everything, which was wonderful. But I realized that nowadays, people are often forced into doing something very specific. But I think even when you get your attending job, and let's say you're a breast surgeon, there's no reason why you can't branch out into other things and things that excite you. And for example, I became aware of lymphedema because of my breast practice and the number of breast patients, post-mastectomy patients I was seeing with lymphedema. And that's what got me into lymphatic surgery, to the extent that my lymphatic practice became so busy that I stopped doing breast reconstructions. I had 5 partners who were also doing breast reconstructions. I said, hey guys, you do the reconstructions. I'm just going to concentrate on lymphatics. And so, as I said, none of my career was planned. And as you go through your career, I think you need to keep an open mind on what you want to do. And you may find that you come across something along the way that is really exciting and really new. And one of the things, you know, people ask about the future of plastic surgery, and I'm very optimistic about the future of plastic surgery, because the history of plastic surgery has been that plastic surgeons develop a technique for doing something, be it a head and neck reconstruction or it doesn't matter what. And then other people, so let's stick with head and neck reconstruction. As I said, when I was training, we did all of the resections as well as the reconstructions. And then with time, we stopped doing the resections because the head and neck surgeons were doing the resections, but they weren't doing the reconstructions. But then they started doing the reconstructions. And then gradually they took over. In North America right now, there's very few places where plastic surgery does the head and neck reconstructions anymore. It's mostly done by head and neck surgeons. And the history of plastic surgery has been that we develop something, we perfect it, and then somebody else comes along and starts doing it, and we let it go, and then we go on and innovate something else, do something else. And the latest one that's the hot topic is lymphedema, but there'll be others coming along. You know, what's going on in peripheral nerve surgery is amazing. You know, some of the nerve transfers were unheard of when I was training. Nobody had ever done nerve transfers, and now nerve transfers are you know, part of everyday practice, and the results are so much better than what I saw when I was training. And so keep an open mind as you go through your, not just your training, but also your practice, because you'll come across things along the way where you may have an opportunity to develop them and make changes.
Okay, thank you, Professor Neligan.
Thank you, Professor. Here's one question from our fifth year resident, Liu Rui. So he's asking that during your career, do you have any difficult times or very severe cases of very painful failures? How do you overcome these kind of situations, and how's the outcome of these cases? Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Everybody has failures. If people don't have failures, it's either because they're not doing enough surgery or because they're lying. And that's one of the things that I loved about microsurgery, because, you know, as you get more experience, you think, oh, I'm pretty good at this. And then you have a flap that dies, and that brings you right back down to earth. And that's one of the challenges, is when something does go wrong, is finding your way out of it. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with you know, admitting your mistakes or your failures and asking somebody for help and saying, hey, I don't know what to do with this. What should we do? Or can you help me? Or can I send this patient to you, or whatever? But yeah, sure, I've always had failures, and it's very devastating when you do have a failure. And it's like riding a horse. You have to get back on the horse, so you don't get afraid of it, you know, and just keep on going. And the other thing is, when something goes wrong, either because of a bad result, or maybe you made a mistake or something like that, one of the most important things is to talk to the patient and explain to the patient what has happened and why, and what you're going to do about it. You know, one of the commonest causes of lawsuits in medicine is poor communication. I'll give you an example. I had a patient, just 2 years ago now. She had lymphedema of her right lower extremity. She had cervical carcinoma of the cervix, and had surgery, including a right groin dissection. And she had lymphedema of her right lower extremity. And I did a supraclavicular lymph node transfer to her groin, and she got a phrenic nerve injury, and she was asthmatic, so she became quite symptomatic, and she talked to some surgeon on the East Coast who said, "Oh, I'm the world expert on phrenic nerve injuries. I can fix you. You're going to be perfect." And I talked to her and explained to her that that's probably not true. That I was happy to re-explore it, that I hadn't come across this before. I actually had come across in one other patient who was asymptomatic and just was picked up in an incidental chest X-ray and made a total recovery. But this one was symptomatic. And so I went back and re-explored her nerve, and I found that she had a neuropraxia of her phrenic nerve. And she had a tight band of scar tissue across it, which I divided. And her diaphragm recovered. But I saw her every week while this was going on, and basically held her hand and got her confidence back in me, because she had lost confidence in me when she had this bad result. It probably helped that her lymphedema got a lot better. So that was, she had a phrenic nerve injury, but her lymphedema got a lot better. But yeah, you're going to have that happen to you several times during your career at different levels. You may have major disasters, you may have minor disasters, but you'll have some bad results. And you just have to keep on going and believe in yourself. And don't be afraid to ask for help.
Thanks, Professor. Sounds like you have very good connection and discussion with your patients. Patients. One more question from Jenny Lin. Jenny, 你想问问题吗？
Hello, Professor Neligan. I'm the
Hi.
4th year resident. So this is really happy to meet you online. I have 2 questions. One is about the fellowship question. Like, since the fellowship is really important, but like I know that if we want to have like probably clinical fellowship in the US, probably we need to have, I don't know, pass the exam or something. So do you think it's important probably during our residency to try to pass the USMLE or something to allow us to be a clinical fellowship in the future?
Yeah, I think if you want to do a fellowship in the US, I think that's important. But the US isn't the only place to do a fellowship. There are lots of other places where they have good fellowships.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have wonderful fellowships in Shanghai, but like I said, I usually encourage my residents to go elsewhere. But Japan, Korea, Australia, there's so many places around the world where there are excellent people, a lot of whom have fellowships. So it doesn't have to be the US.
Okay, thank you. And another question is that like the doctor being a surgeon is probably a lifelong career. And what is the thing to keep you so passionate and devoted to this surgeon, to be a surgeon?
I think because I became a surgeon because I loved it. And if you're doing something you love, then it's like you're not working. And so that's what, nothing keeps you going. You want to do it because it's fun.
Yeah.
I didn't become a surgeon to save mankind, right? I did it because it was fun.
Thank you.
And a lot of people are afraid to admit that, but it is fun.
Thank you.
And another question for our junior resident, 那个群林。
Okay. Hi, Professor Neligan. I'm Charlie. I'm the 4th year's resident. Sorry for the question other than profession. So what we might know that is Peter Neligan is not only a master in plastic surgery and also an amazing musician playing the guitar. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so I have ever played with you in the ASPS jam band.
That's right.
That's Midway in San Diego 3 years ago. I remember we played the tunes like Cocaine and Pride and Joy, but I didn't notice that was you at that time. But just after a few months, I reviewed the photo and I found, wow, man, that's Peter Neligan. Wow, it's so surprising to me. So
I'm just going to take off the blur on my background.
Sorry. Okay, so I would like to ask how you keep your interest playing the music when you are so busy in your work.
I would often do it at night when I came home in the evening, just with headphones, so I don't wake everybody. I've always been interested in music. I think whatever you're interested in, you should have. Having a hobby is wonderful. Music for me has been the hobby. Yeah. My blurred background for some reason isn't changing, but I have all my guitars behind me here.
Okay, thank you.
And Professor, one more question from our attendings. So they want to ask, how do you maintain your passion to connect to the younger generations in these fast-changing times and become the most popular teacher for residents around the world?
I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying about loving what you do. I mean, I love doing what I do, and I love chatting to guys like you. I've done it all over the place, and it's a lot of fun because at your level, everything seems impossible. I mean, when I was a resident and junior, I thought, you know, I don't know how these guys do it. And then before I know it, I'm one of those guys, and then that's what happens. And so I think talking to people, reassuring them that it's not difficult, do what you want to do, have fun doing it. You know, if you're doing something you love, you tend to get good at it. And when you're good at it, then doors open for you. People will want to hire you, and you have, you know, the better you are at something, the more fun it is. You know yourself from any sporting activities, whether it's swimming or sailing or whatever. Once you become really good, then you have a lot more fun. It's the same with surgery. As you get really good at it, you have a lot more fun, and you get to try new things. You know, we all innovate every day, and innovation may be just putting a stitch in a different way or using a different type of suture material. But sometimes those innovations will progress to something much more. And that's, for example, how Tessier started craniofacial surgery. Like, he was treating patients with hypertelorbitism, and he knew that if he did a combined approach from extracranial and intracranial, that it would work. And he did it. And the first couple of patients he did died. And yet he was so convinced that he was right that he continued to do it. And that's why we have craniofacial surgery today. And so, you know, a lot of innovations are minor, but a lot of them are major. And sometimes a minor one leads to a major one. And all of you who are in a residency program, you wouldn't have got into the residency program if you weren't good. And so you can do any of these things as long as you're as long as you choose correctly. And by choosing correctly, you need to choose whatever it is that you really love, that makes you really happy to do. And it could be general plastic surgery, it could be microsurgery, it could be anything, any area of subspecialty.
And one more question from our senior resident, Rona. And 黄志荣讲吧。
Hello, Peter Neligan and Dr. Peter Neligan. I'm Ronald Huang, fifth year resident of Chang'an Memorial Hospital. And it's my pleasure to meet you in online. And my question is, in your opinion, where is our residents' future? Because there are much field in plastic surgery, like microsurgery, general plastic, cosmetic. And there are some new fields like the machine learning and some virtual stimulations, and that robotic like Tom is doing now. And do you think our resident is going to learn about what our mentors like you or like Professor Fu Chen-Wei did, and we're going to create a new one in the future, or we try to find our path to become like the mentor like yours? Is my questions. Thank you.
No, you can. I mean, if you ask Tommy why he does what he does, Tommy, you do it because you love doing it, right? And you're good at it.
Yes.
That's
Lucky.
That's what I've been saying. And if you're lucky enough to find that, then it could be anything. Sometimes you may even find, like the way I got into head and neck surgery, for example. I was attending head and neck tumor board one day, and one of the neurosurgeons presented a case, and he said, "I think this tumor is resectable, but I don't know how to access it." And the head of head and neck surgery, who was no laryngologist, said, "I can get you in there, but it's going to leave a hell of a hole." And I was in the room, and I said, "Well, I can fill the hole." And we looked at each other, and we thought, "Holy smokes, we can do it together." You know, neither one of us could do it by ourselves, but we can do it together. And so if you see something, you may see something in another specialty, and you think, you know what, if they were to put a flap in there, or if they were to do something different, and you go talk to them, and you collaborate with them. And collaboration doesn't mean it doesn't mean, for example, if you're collaborating with breast surgeons, it doesn't mean just showing up at the end of the case to put a tissue expander in. It means being available. It means going to their tumor boards. It means being part of the team and contributing. And then you're accepted, and then you know you can grow it from there. And so you don't have to be confined by what you see in your residency. I mean, you may see something in your residency that really excites you that you want to spend the rest of your life doing. But you may also see something in another specialty where you think, "Ooh, I could contribute a lot to that." So I think that's how you build it.
Yeah, it's really helped me to find my way in the future. And thank you, Peter Neligan, and thank you, Laura.
Okay, thank you, Zhirong. And Professor, I have a small question. Since everybody has asked lots of fellowship and resident training questions, and now due to the income factors, lots of plastic surgeons, they choose to do the true only cosmetic surgery after their training program. But to us, we have done a very compact training, microsurgery, burn everything here, craniofacial here for 6 years, and now probably we quit these practice and go to the aesthetic for the earning more money. What do you think about the aesthetic surgery and the future? And is it a good thing to do a total cosmetic surgery after the plastic training?
Again, I get back to what I was saying about doing something that you love. Obviously, I mean, I could have made a lot more money in my career if I just did cosmetic surgery, but I didn't love it. The surgery was fun, but like I said, the patients are a pain in the ass. And so, if cosmetic surgery is something that really excites you, then by all means become a cosmetic surgeon and do cosmetic surgery. Some people are in the unfortunate position in some countries where they can't make a living just doing reconstructive surgery, and they have to do some cosmetic surgery, and that's fine. But I was very fortunate that I was able to make a very comfortable living doing reconstructive surgery. I was able to give up doing aesthetic surgery and just do what I really loved. So for me, it gets back to just doing what you really love. Because like I said, if you do that, you get really good at it. If you get really good at it, then somebody will offer you a job somewhere that maybe will pay you a lot more money than where you're at now, or whatever.
Thank you. So our Chief Ritalin, do you have any comments or questions for our today's talk?
Thank you, Laura, for giving me the last chance to ask Peter in person. Well, as the chief of this department, I believe that we still have a lot of things that I have to learn. That I'm probably asking this question for our residents. That of course, when I choosing my job, I'm a hand surgeon, but actually it's not a very popular work or field in Taiwan. That when I pursuing myself to be a hand surgeon 10, 20 years ago. During my during these years, actually, I found out that because there comes a lot of competition in this field, so you want to be not necessary to be the top, but at least someone in this field. One thing is that in academically, do you think that we should encourage our residents that or fellows that they have to go for a master degrees or PhD degrees for that to be more competitive? And the others is that I was thinking that do we have to encourage our residents, because you have full fellowship when in the past, and do you think that they should be more capable not only focusing on only one field. They have to be some more combination of ideas that for the world in the future, that to be a very competitive one. What will you encourage your resident or your fellow in the, how will you do that? What do you think?
Well, I always try to explain to residents that they've got lots of time. They're young. They've got a lot of time ahead, and when you're at that stage of your career and you're looking at where you might want to practice, you need to look at what you're likely going to be doing there, and whether just doing one fellowship in one thing is going to be enough. If you're being hired as microsurgeon specifically, then sure, a microsurgery fellowship is fine. But for example, a lot of people now combine microsurgery, for example, microsurgery fellowship with a craniofacial fellowship, because those two things add so much to your capabilities. And I think you should, if you can afford it, and most people can afford it. They may not realize that they can afford it, but they can afford it. Then the more fellowships you do, the better. When I did my fellowships, we were, as a family, we were on my income put us officially below the poverty line in Canada. And we would have, with two kids that were both little, and we would, decide on a weekend if we had enough money to take them to McDonald's, or if we had enough money to, buy a bottle of wine for us. And yet we had no money. We were stony broke. And that was probably the happiest time for us as a family. It was so wonderful. In terms of your question of higher degrees, again, I think it depends what you want to do. I think if you want to be a researcher, for example, and you're going to be applying for grants, then I think to be competitive, you do need something like a master's or a PhD, because you're going to be competing with people who have that. I think in clinical practice, that's not as important. Again, it depends on where you're working, what your situation, and what the competition is going to be like in that area. But I think a higher degree is a good idea for research fellowships, or for somebody who wants research to be a major part of their career. But I don't think it's as important for somebody who's going to be mainly clinical, or all 100% clinical, whether they're academic or not. But I think a fellowship is very important, especially if you're going to be in a fellowship. Just makes you you can do the stuff, whatever it is, whether it's head and neck or breast or micro, or it doesn't matter. You can do the stuff at the end of your residency, but to become really comfortable at it, you learn so much from a fellowship, because all of the stress of being a resident is gone. And you can just concentrate on learning as much as you can about the topic you've chosen to do your fellowship in.
Yeah, thank you. Because I'm thinking that well, for our new generation, these residents, they are really young, and how to keep them very competitive. I would just encourage them that they would not just expert in one field, and should have more broad spectrum in every knowledge that that could be very helpful for
Right.
their future careers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you're muted.
Professor, thank you both professors. I also noticed that we have one craniofacial expert, 陈建宗院长 online. So 建宗院长在线上，方便分享或是想要 comment 吗？
我有点那个。
Okay, hello.
Okay. Oh. Um. 可以看到吗？
可以。
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. Actually, I totally agree that I think the fellowship training in our department, I think, is very important. Another training after the resident training, and I also agree that right now the many subspecialty the expert training, fellowship training, such as microsurgical training combined with craniofacial. I think that could be a very good idea. So I think that another very good example is there is right now the I think the chief in the NYU, what's the name? I sorry forgot
Eddie
his name.
Rodriguez.
Eddie Rodriguez. Yeah, I'm very I'm very impressed what he achieved in the NYU. He has been the previous craniofacial surgeons also complete his the maxillofacial surgical training in US, and then come to our department as a fellow, as a microsurgical fellowship training. So I think nowadays he can combine both experts training to achieve his the facial transplantation. I think that's a very good example. So nowadays, I think the fellowship training is not only focused on the one field. I think the young surgeons they should explore more subspecialty the field, so they can expand their they can expand their visions. Right. So I totally agree. That's a very good idea.
Thank you, Professor. And our young surgeons like Tommy, Johnny, Zhou Baoren医师, and JJ, do you have any questions or comments and feedbacks? Thanks. Tommy, 先吧。
Yeah, thank you, Professor Neligan, for the wonderful opportunity for us, and especially for the young, our young generation. I have a question about the format of the medical education, because in the past we learned from the textbook, also the paper and the in-person meeting, but nowadays everything online, so like webinar series and YouTube and Google. So what do you think about this? And also how about the future? Do you think this is the combined or the webinar will replace everything?
I don't think the webinar will replace everything. I think it'll be. I don't think it's going to go away. I think we'll always be doing webinars, but I think a combination of online and in person is the best. I mean, what you learn at an in-person meeting is often, you may learn it at a dinner, or you may learn it in the bar or something. You know, you pick up something that you're not going to be able to find in a webinar. Webinars are great, and you can learn a lot from a webinar, but you miss that interpersonal relationship. And just for example, many years ago now, my son was going to, he went to Japan when he'd finished college for a year to teach English. And I had several friends in Japan, and I was able to phone them and say, look, my son is going to be in Japan for next year. Is it okay if he calls you if he has trouble? And I was able to do that, not because I knew them from a webinar, but because maybe I'd had a drink with them, or I'd had dinner with them, and I knew them, you know. And so the networking that you get from a face-to-face meeting, the webinar can't replace that. I think the level of education from what's presented in the webinar is as good as you can find at a meeting, at a face-to-face meeting, but I think you miss the interpersonal thing, which I think is very important.
Yeah, thank you so much. Do you think the webinar is a conflict with the textbook, a publisher, or some online free resources?
Again, I don't think it'll replace it, because people like to be able to either, you know, go online and read the stuff or see a video or whatever, as well as being on a webinar. So I think the written textbook or the ebook or whatever will continue to be a resource that people can use. I mean, I know that a lot of our residents will they'll bring their laptop to the operating room, and they'll look up a flap just before we do it, you know, from an online resource that may be a book or maybe whatever. That's one of the things we've made an effort to do in the textbook, is to have a very strong online presence, and with downloadable images and videos and stuff, so people can access all of that stuff rather than just read the book. People still like to have the book to put on their shelves, but most people use the book as an ebook or online.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Neligan, for your wonderful opinion. And maybe JJ or Johnny or Bang Yun can also provide final remark.
Okay, thank you, Professor Neligan. I'm PY. Actually, I am staff in the craniofacial team in Chang'an. So probably you did not know me at all. However, I just wondering, I have one question, and John Fang Laura has asking the question for me. I just wondering how you can keep your patient, to deal with the younger generation. And you know, for me, I'm a middle age. As for me, probably I have a middle age crisis for now. So even I have some a little bit, I have some surgical technique. I could know how to do the surgery, but in the future, I'm still wondering how I could spend more of my time to explore anything I could learn. So I'm not sure. Can you guide me something for this? And about when you are in your middle age, what any obstacle for you to tide over? Thank you.
Well, I think it's always very difficult to hand a case over to a resident who may be a very good resident, but you know in your own mind that you could do it better than he or she can do it. And that's very difficult. And so you just have to do it, and you have to just, you know, teach them what I had a rule, for example, if I had if I was doing a flap, any kind of flap, doesn't matter, I would let the residents do the flap. And then I had a rule that if something happened to that flap, and we had to go back, that I would let them do the take back, but they got one go. If they didn't solve the problem after one attempt, and they couldn't spend hours doing it, it had to be, you know, a definitive something like redo the anastomosis or something. If that one attempt didn't work, then I took over. And so that made me comfortable, and it made them comfortable too, because it took the pressure off them. They knew they had one shot at it, and if it didn't work, then I was still there to back them up. And so, and I think you also have to change your attitude depending on the resident, because the expertise of residents is variable. Some are really, really good, and some are not so good. And so, you know, I usually will decide ahead of time, depending on if I'm with a senior resident or a junior resident or whatever, I'll decide how much of the procedure I let them do and when I'm going to take over. And if I see them doing something really stupid, then I'll not just correct them, but I'll take over, and I'll say, look, I'm going to show you how to do it, and I'll let you do it the next time. But tricks like that.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Actually, I think all our residents are not stupid, but they are very smart. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Johnny?
Yeah, Dr. Neligan, I really appreciate your spending this time with us. I hope you were able to finish your cup of wine.
Yeah.
For for me, I spent time in St. Louis and obviously with Susan and Allison Snyder Warwick, and I attended quite a few of those morning meetings, and I just noticed how I was amazed at how the residents were always, especially the senior residents, who were trying to always, I wouldn't say pimp, but I would say more of like trying to get the junior residents to comment, and from that they gain knowledge from that. And back when I was a resident, I've always felt that I was very passive in trying to get more education or trying to learn more knowledge. And a few of the fellows that came here, 10 years ago, told us about the way education is taught, well, not education, but the way knowledge is spread. And I've noticed that we were always seen, the residents were always seen as very technically competent, but not as much knowing much about what's in textbook. I think now, after coming back to Taiwan after my fellowship, I've noticed that our residents actually are much more knowledgeable, and are in the meetings that we have. We hold these weekly meetings on Thursday mornings where we actually read the chapters from your book, from the Neligan textbook, and then get the residents to present and have more in-depth discussion. But given your experience from back when you were a chief in Washington and when you're in Toronto and everything, what was always, in your opinion, the most effective way to learn, to get knowledge? Was it for the, from your perspective as a chief, to have as much residents to learn as much possible rather than, each individualized, learning from their surgery or learning from individual surgeons? Is it most effective to have these weekly meetings and then, just read the chapters, or and then to get prepared for the boards? What's your, I want to get your feedback on this in terms of resident education, and it's also actually for me too, personally.
Right. I think like I said, with surgery and technical skills, there's a difference. Some are really good and some are not so good, and it's the same with learning. Some are kind of way ahead of others in terms of their book knowledge or their aggressiveness. For example, some people are very shy. When I was a resident, I was really shy, and I hated being pimped. I hated being pimped. So I think, I mean, it's a good way to learn. And I think you just have to adapt the way of learning to the individual. I think something like you described with your Thursday morning meetings and going over a particular topic, wherever it's, whether you're using my book or whatever you're using, I think that's a great way of doing it, because that levels the playing field. Because even the shy ones are not going to ask the question; they still have to read the thing, and they still have to know the subject and be able to answer questions on it. So I think doing something formal like that is a great idea. And the same with preparation for your board exams. I mean, what I've always done is we would have, for example, mock oral exams with the residents, and so I'd give the resident an exam as if it was in the board exam, where you're not allowed to smile or give any feedback to the resident, and you sort of ask them questions, and that residents found that very useful, because then when they went into the actual exam, they'd done it before, and they felt it was familiar, and they weren't scared of it.
Was it when you say mock, was it mock oral or mock written exams? Both?
We do both. We in Seattle we did mock orals right from the beginning. Even when residents were in their first year, they got mock oral exams, just so they would get in the habit of knowing how to answer questions. And for example, not volunteering information. If somebody asks you something and you say something that may be related to the topic, but you have no idea about it, you're giving the examiner an opening to ask you a question that you may not know the answer to. And so it's really teaching them exammanship and knowing how to answer questions and sort of not getting in trouble.
Dude, I'm just sorry. I just wanted to build up on that question. Because I've heard from my friends in US where they told me that these mock orals or mock written are actually very, very important because if you do poorly, the resident or the program director or even the chief can kind of step in and kind of say that it will affect your promotion or affect your graduation from the residency.
Yeah. So we do every year we do a mock written exam. It's a national exam. It's voluntary, but in our program, the residents got, 4 or 5 hours, whatever the length of the exam was, they would get that time off so that they didn't have to be in the operating room and stuff, and they would sit down and do it. And we would use the results of that exam basically as an assessment of how they were doing in their residency. So, if somebody who was a third-year resident did really, really well, he'd go on to a fourth-year resident. But if he did really, really badly, he may be held back and made to repeat that year. So it's very important.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Neligan. It's great meeting you.
So thanks, Johnny. Any questions, comments from JJ?
Professor Neligan, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, it's great learning from you and listen to your comments and suggestions. Every year when the chief residents, I would say when our fifth year residents are walking into their 6th year, many of them will start to think about the future. And here at Chang'an, we have 4 different subspecialties: craniofacial, micro, trauma, and burn. But we also know that some of the residents do have difficulties, or they are wondering which specialty they need to go in, and in the subspecialty, what specific area that they should or they would choose for their future career, especially in the beginning. Do you have any suggestion for these chief residents who are almost finishing their training and picking up their future career?
Yeah, I think
how to select them.
I know that residents worry about it a lot, and often what they'll do is they'll look around and see what jobs are available, and then they'll choose craniofacial, for example, because there are craniofacial jobs available, but they may not particularly like craniofacial. And I always tell them that it's much more important to do what you like to do, because if you're worried about jobs, if you're doing something you love, you get good at it, and when you get good at it, jobs will open up. So I think as a resident, you need to really be like a sponge and pay attention to all of the rotations that you go through as you're going through, to see what it is that really excites you, because that's probably what you should end up doing. And we were talking about cosmetic surgery earlier, and for example, you can make a lot more money as a cosmetic surgeon, but it's no good being very, very rich and doing something you don't really like to do. It's much better to be doing something that you really, really enjoy doing and maybe not making as much money. So it's a very difficult choice, because there are so many areas of subspecialty within plastic surgery now. I think the other thing that people should remember is that your choice doesn't have to be your lifelong choice. So if you decide you want to do trauma and you find that, the lifestyle is horrible, or I really don't enjoy this, or whatever, you can change. You're trained in all areas. So you may have to do, an extra training or a fellowship in something, but that's fine. And you end up doing something that you are happy with, because that's the most important thing.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor. I've noticed one Dr. Huang, also a chief of Kaohsiung Plastic Surgery and also a mother for a chief resident of Kaohsiung Plastic Surgery. Any say hi to Professor Neligan? Hi.
Hello.
So
I'm very happy to listen to what you have talked to the young residents. thank you very much for you to spend all those times with the youngsters. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Okay, already 1 hour and 40 minutes, long talk from the Professor Peter Neligan's life career sharing and experience sharing. Thanks for your nice talk. Any close? Probably we are going to close our meeting today. Any 德部长可以帮我们close the meeting 吗？ Any comments from Professor Lin?
Thank you, Professor Peter Neligan. I believe that you already helping our young residents to know what they should do or how they can choose their life career, and I believe that your golden words actually is break through some of the thing. It's just some thought for our young generations. They should have get a lot of information from you and from this interchange of the opinions. And thank you for your times. And we certainly hope we could have you. We can have this kind of communications or some this kind of chattings in the near future. And thank you, Tommy, for arranging all this webinar that make it happen. Thank you, Peter Neligan.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thanks, Tommy.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye bye.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
You. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.